The green room for Good Morning America was a study in fluorescent-lit sterility, a stark contrast to the contained storm that was Tom Hardy. He sat, a monument of black denim and a worn motorcycle jacket, on a too-small couch, methodically cracking his knuckles. His publicist, a sharp-eyed woman named Imogen who had navigated minefields for him for a decade, leaned against the doorframe. The narrative is the film, Tom. The Revenant for the 21st Century. Man vs. Wilderness. Physical endurance. The art of it. George will lob a few softballs about the cold, the method, maybe a light tease about the beard. She spoke in a low, steady cadence, a hypnotist trying to soothe a lion. He might bring up the taboo rumors. Just deflect with, the focus is on this project. That's the drum. Beat it. Hardy grunted, a sound from deep in his chest. His eyes, a startlingly pale blue against the dark scruff of his beard, were fixed on a point on the wall, seeing not the generic landscape painting but some internal horizon. He'd done this 1,000 times. The circus. The reduction of a year of frozen, brutal work into 5 minutes of chipper morning chat. He hated it, but he understood the contract. A young production assistant with a headset cracked the door. 5 minutes, Mr. Hardy. The walk to the set was a short gauntlet through cables and bustling crew. The studio was a cathedral of cheerful noise, all bright colors and smiling floor managers. And there, at the epicenter, was George Stephanopoulos, a vision in a crisp navy suit, his smile as polished as his desk. Tom. Welcome, welcome. The handshake was firm, professional. The eyes were assessing. They settled into the facing chairs. The opening was, as Imogen predicted, benign. They showed a blistering, beautiful clip from the film. Hardy's character, a trapper left for dead, dragging himself across a frozen river. The audience gasped. Incredible, George said, turning to him. The physicality is just staggering. What did that do to you? Hardy leaned in, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that commanded the microphone. It's not about what it does to you. It's about emptying out. Becoming the vessel for that experience. The cold, the hunger, the isolation, they're not adversaries. They're the text. George nodded with practiced appreciation. The method. You're renowned for it, living it. For Taboo, I heard you stayed in character for months, even with the crew. Created quite an atmosphere. A sly, knowing smile. Some might call that intimidating. Here we go, Hardy thought. The pivot to the myth, the difficult reputation. The work requires what it requires, he said, a slight edge sanding the words. It's about preserving the reality of the world we're building. It's not a popularity contest. Of course, George soothed, but he leaned forward, the glint in his eyes shifting from appreciative to prosecutorial. But that intensity, that single-mindedness, it doesn't exist in a vacuum, does it? It has a cost. On sets. On relationships. He let the word hang. Your ex-wife, Sarah, gave an interview recently. She didn't name you, but she spoke of the emotional tsunami of being with an artist who vanishes completely into his work, who becomes unreachable, even cruel. She said it left her, and I quote, a shell. How do you respond to that? To the human cost of the vessel. The air in the studio was vacuumed out. The crew froze. Imogen, watching from the shadowed wings, closed her eyes. This wasn't a tease. This was a targeted strike, using the most painful, private wreckage of his life as a segue. Hardy's face, already a landscape of strong angles, seemed to solidify into granite. The pale eyes bored into George's. That, he said, the word had dropped. Stone, is not your business. With respect, Tom, George pressed, his tone now that of a concerned journalist, when someone of your profile, someone who champions mental health causes, is accused of causing such profound distress, it becomes a matter of public interest. The contradiction between the artist and the man. The contradiction. Hardy's voice dropped even lower, a dangerous growl. You're sitting here, in a makeup chair at 4 a.m., reading words someone else wrote for you, to sell ad space for yogurt and debt consolidation. You're a conduit for a product. And you want to lecture me on contradiction. You want to dissect my failed marriage for your public interest. You have no idea what interest is. You have curiosity. They're not the same. George's polished composure slipped a millimeter. A flush crept up his neck. This is a legitimate interview, Tom. Not an attack. We're discussing the impact of your process. No, Hardy said, rising from his chair not in a burst, but with a terrifying, slow control. You're not discussing my process. You're conducting an autopsy on my personal life for ratings. You're using a woman's pain, a private, painful thing, as a prop. That's not journalism. That's savagery with a smile. The studio was a silent, gaping mouth. The on-air light glowed like a malevolent red eye. George Stephanopoulos, a veteran of political debates and presidential scandals, found himself uncharacteristically speechless, facing not a politician with a talking point, but a raw, unmediated force of fury. "Sit down, Tom, please," George managed, his voice losing its anchor smoothness. "We're having a conversation." "We're not having a conversation." Hardy's voice exploded, finally shattering the tense quiet. It wasn't a shout, it was a projectile, sharp and hard. "A conversation requires respect. You ambushed me. You took a clip of a film I bled for and used it as bait to ask about my divorce. What is wrong with you?" He took a step toward the desk, not threateningly, but with the sheer physical presence that made security guards offstage tense. "Where is the line for you people? Is there one? Or is everything just content?" From the wings, a senior producer was frantically making a slashing motion across his throat. The director, in the control room, was yelling, "Go to break. Now, now." But the red light held, captivated by the car crash. George, now visibly angry, his professional mask fully gone, shot back. "You don't get to dictate the questions, Tom. The public has a right to know the man behind the myth. Especially when the myth is one of such consuming intensity." "The man behind the myth." Hardy let out a laugh, a short, brutal sound. "You don't want to know the man. The man is complicated. The man is flawed. The man regrets things that would keep you awake at night. You want a caricature. The brooding, difficult artist. The toxic male genius. It's a neater story. Sells better. Isn't that right, George?" He spat the name. "It's all about the sell. Your integrity has a price tag, and it's sitting in the accounts of your sponsors." This was mutiny on live television. This was the unspoken contract between celebrity and interviewer, the agreement to perform a version of reality, being torn up and thrown in the host's face. "I think you need to leave," George said, his voice cold, a command. He was reclaiming control by ejecting the source of the chaos. Hardy stared at him for a long, terrifying second. Then he nodded slowly. "Finally, something we agree on." He turned, not to the side exit for guests, but toward the main audience stage. He walked to the edge of the platform, looking out at the rows of shocked, pale faces. For a moment, the fury on his face softened into something like pity, or profound weariness. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he said directly to them, his voice suddenly clear, human, stripped of its growl. "But maybe you needed to. Maybe you need to see how they turn people into soap opera for your breakfast." He then looked directly into the camera, the lens that fed millions of homes. "Don't buy it. It's poison." With that, he leapt off the stage, a clean, easy drop of about 4 feet, landed on the studio floor, and strode straight up the central aisle of the audience, a dark Avenger parting a sea of stunned morning show viewers in pastel sweaters. The camera, bewildered, followed him until he pushed through the double doors at the back and vanished. The red light finally died. The screen cut to a violently cheerful commercial for a family theme park. Backstage was a war zone of panic. Imogen was already sprinting down a back corridor, intercepting Hardy as he emerged from the audience entrance into the labyrinth of offices. He was a thundercloud, radiating a heat that was almost physical. "Car. Now. Not the front," was all she said, falling into step beside him. Her phone was buzzing like an angry hornet's nest in her hand. They moved with grim efficiency, a duo used to navigating chaos. A flustered ABC executive in a too-tight suit tried to block their path at a security door. "Mr. Hardy, we must discuss." Hardy didn't break stride. "Discuss it with my lawyer. And my agent. And the head of every studio I work with." His gaze swept over the man. "Get out of my way." The man moved. The loading dock was a relief of cold, dank air. The blacked-out SUV was there, engine running. Hardy yanked the door open and slid inside. Imogen followed, sealing them in silence. For a full minute, neither spoke. The only sound was the distant wail of a New York siren. Hardy's hands were clenched into fists on his knees. The adrenaline was a tremor he forced himself to master through sheer will. Imogen broke the quiet, her voice analytical, already shifting to damage control. Okay. That was unprecedented. They'll call you unhinged. A bully. They'll play the toxic masculinity card hard. Let them, Hardy growled, staring ahead. Sarah, she might feel compelled to speak. This could reignite everything. At the mention of his ex-wife's name, he flinched, a crack in the armor. He saw her face, not the public one, but the private, weary one from the end. The truth of George's words, however maliciously intended, was a shard of glass in his gut. He had been a tsunami. He had left a shell. I know, he said, the fight gone from his voice, replaced by a hollow ache. God, I know. He turned to her, his eyes stark. I don't care what they say about me. Not anymore. But if this hurts her, if they come for her again because of me, he trailed off, the sentence more terrifying than any threat. Imogen's phone lit up with a new alert. She scanned it, her brow furrowing. It's not just the usual outlets. The clip is everywhere. But the comments, they're not what I expected. She handed him the phone. He scrolled reluctantly. The headlines were as predicted, Hardy meltdown. Actor goes berserk on GMA. But beneath them, in the social media trenches, a different narrative was brewing. Threads with thousands of likes asked, since when did morning TV become a divorce court? And, George Stephanopoulos just proved Tom Hardy's point for him. A viral tweet read, Hardy didn't lose his temper. He rejected the premise. We watched a man refuse to be turned into content. It was terrifying and beautiful. He handed the phone back, a flicker of something other than anger in his eyes. Not hope. Bewilderment. Get me out of this city, he said. Then, after a pause. And get me Sarah's number. My direct line. Not through her people. I need to call her. Before they do. The SUV cut through the Manhattan dawn towards the sanctuary of a private airfield. In the back, the storm had passed, leaving a landscape of exhausted clarity. Hardy placed the call. It rang 4 times, each tone a hammer on his sternum, before going to voicemail. Her voice, calm and melodic, asking him to leave a message. The sound of it, so ordinary and so intimately familiar, was a physical pain. He didn't leave a message. He texted instead, knowing it was cowardly but necessary for precision. Sarah. It's Tom. Saw the GMA clip. I am so sorry. That should never have been dragged up. If any press contact you, direct them to Imogen. I will handle it. I am sorry for everything. Truly. He hit send, the finality of it feeling like dropping a stone into a deep, dark well. Imogen's phone, meanwhile, was a command center. The strategy was forming. Absolute silence from their camp. No statement, no justification, no reactive interviews. Let the footage speak for itself. The film studio was panicking, but Imogen was firm. Any defense looks defensive. The work is the work. The performance in the film is the only statement he needs to make. By the time they were airborne, headed for the remote cabin in the Pacific Northwest he'd bought for moments like this, the media ecosystem had fully bifurcated. The traditional entertainment news cycle painted him as the industry's id unleashed, a dangerous, egotistical monster. But in the broader cultural conversation, a more complex debate raged. Ethics professors discussed the boundaries of public interest. Psychologists analyzed the live breakdown of the interview format. Former child stars and survivors of media frenzies tweeted their support, recognizing the unique horror of having your most private wounds packaged for public consumption. The most significant blow to GMA came not from Hardy's camp, but from within. An anonymous staffer leaked the pre-interview briefing notes to a media watchdog blog. The notes, highlighted in yellow, showed the directive: move from physicality of role to personal cost. Use Sarah Ward interview NYT style, 10/14 as pivot. Goal: contrast between on-screen endurance and off-screen collateral. Creates compelling tension. It was clinical. It was a hit job dressed up as journalism. The blog's headline was simple: the manufacture of tension, how GMA planned the Tom Hardy ambush. The word, ambush, stuck. George Stephanopoulos gave a stiff, brief statement about pursuing tough questions and regretting the off-air tensions, but it was clear the high ground was lost. The ratings for the segment were astronomical, but the aftertaste was of shame, not success. Hardy, isolated in the vast, silent green of the Northwest, felt none of this as victory. He felt scraped raw. The cabin was filled with the ghosts of his failures, made louder by the silence. He chopped wood until his hands blistered, trying to outrun the echo of George's voice, a shell. 2 days after the incident, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Then he did. Tom. It was Sarah. Her voice was quiet, measured. Not angry. Tired. Sarah. Thank you for calling. I got your text. I saw it. The whole thing. A pause. He could hear her choosing her words, a habit he remembered. It was brutal to watch. For a lot of reasons. I know. I am so. Don't. She cut him off gently. Don't apologize for that man on TV. That's not what this is about. What he did was gross. Exploitative. You were right to be furious. She took a breath. But Tom, you were always furious. At the wrong things. At me, sometimes, for not being able to live inside the storm with you. The truth of it landed. Clean and killing. He had no defense. Yes, I've said my piece in therapy, Tom. Not in the New York Times. I'm moving on. Really moving on. This spectacle, it's a reminder of why I had to leave. The chaos finds you. It always did. And you sometimes seem to need it. She sighed, a sound of infinite weariness. I hope you find peace. But not like this. Not on television. The call ended. He stood on the porch, the immense, indifferent trees towering around him. She hadn't absolved him. She hadn't condemned him to the public. She had simply stated her truth, privately, and left him alone with the vast, echoing consequences of his own nature. A week later, Tom Hardy emerged not for a talk show, but for the film's premiere in London. The paparazzi swarm was thicker, more aggressive, screaming questions about GMA, about Sarah, about his temper. He walked the gauntlet in silence, his face an impenetrable mask. Inside, the film played. On screen, he was a raw nerve of survival, a beast of will and pain. The performance was transcendent, undeniable. It was the perfect, wordless rebuttal. At the after-party, held in a cavernous Tate Modern Hall, he was approached by an elderly, revered British character actor, a man known for his dignity and quiet career. The old man took his hand, holding it in both of his. Saw the American nonsense, the old man murmured, his voice like gravel. Dreadful business. But you showed them the door, my boy. And then you showed them this. He gestured to the screen where clips were still playing. The work is the only thing that outlives the noise. Remember that. The work, and the truth you put in it. The rest is just weather. It was the only review that mattered. He left the party early. The next morning, his agency released a single, concise statement from him, not about the incident, but about his future work. It announced he was taking a 12-month sabbatical from acting to develop a small, independent production company focused on quiet, character-driven stories. The subtext was clear, a retreat from the machine that required such brutal, personal barter. The narrative solidified. Tom Hardy became a legend, but of a different sort. Not just for his intensity on screen, but for his volcanic refusal off it. He wasn't kicked off Good Morning America. He had, in the public's imagination, set it on fire on his way out. He became a symbol for a certain kind of artistic integrity, flawed, furious, and utterly unwilling to be commodified. George Stephanopoulos' interview entered the annals of television infamy, a cautionary tale about overreach. The actor's ex-wife was never publicly heard from again on the matter. And Hardy, in his self-imposed exile, found a strange peace. Not the peace of calm, but the peace of alignment. The storm was still in him, it always would be, but he was no longer letting others sell tickets to it. The next time the world saw him, it would be on his own terms, in a story he had chosen, where the only demons he battled were the ones written on the page. The man had drawn a line in the sand of a studio floor, and in doing so, had finally mapped the borders of his own life.